The Dallas skyline shimmered through the glass walls of Carter Technologies. As Michael Carter hurried into the executive conference room, he had arrived early as he always did, because he knew how important the day was. The company was preparing to finalize a $500 million acquisition, and Michael had spent the previous 3 months coordinating documents, reviewing schedules, and making sure every department was ready. Michael was a single father raising his 9-year-old daughter, Emma. He rarely talked about his personal life at work, but everyone knew he was dependable. He was the kind of employee who stayed late when something went wrong and arrived early when something needed to be fixed. Despite his responsibilities at home, Michael never used being a father as an excuse. He simply worked harder that morning, however. The atmosphere inside the conference room was tense. Executives from both companies sat around a long glass table. Lawyers whispered over contracts. Financial advisors compared numbers. Investors watched carefully. At the head of the table sat Victoria Hayes, the billionaire CEO of Carter Technologies. Victoria was known for being brilliant, aggressive and impatient. Michael stood near the screen, holding a folder containing the final transaction documents. Victoria glanced at him. "Are those the final papers?" "Yes," Michael replied. She looked at him dismissively. "Put them over there." Michael placed the folder beside her. One of the visiting executives asked, "Who prepared the final analysis?" Michael answered, "I did." Victoria interrupted, "He's operations staff." The executive looked surprised. Victoria leaned back, "He handles the details." Then she smiled coldly. "You're nothing but hired help, Michael." The room became uncomfortable. Michael said nothing. He had heard worse things in his life. His daughter had taught him something important. Not every insult deserved an answer. The meeting continued. The investors reviewed the numbers. Then one of them suddenly stopped. "Wait," everyone looked toward him. "There is a discrepancy in the acquisition valuation." Victoria frowned. "What kind of discrepancy?" The investor pointed toward the document. "This adjustment could change the transaction value by tens of millions." The room erupted into nervous conversation. Victoria looked at her financial team. "How did this happen?" Nobody had an answer. Michael quietly stepped forward. "I know where it came from." Everyone turned toward him. Victoria looked irritated. "Michael, this isn't the time." "It actually is." He opened his folder and displayed a series of calculations. The discrepancy came from an outdated revenue projection that was copied into the final model. The investor leaned forward. "Can you fix it?" Michael nodded. "I already did." He pulled out another document. "I prepared a corrected model this morning because the numbers didn't match the latest quarterly report." Silence filled the room. The investor studied the pages. Then he looked at Michael. "This is accurate." Michael nodded. Victoria stared at him. The man she had just called, hired help, had discovered the problem before anyone else. And he was about to determine whether the company's $500 million deal would survive. Michael placed the corrected financial model on the screen and calmly explained every adjustment. The room, which had been filled with nervous whispers only moments earlier, became completely silent. Investors leaned forward while the legal team compared his figures with the original contract. "The error comes from the previous quarter's projection." Michael explained, "If we use that number, the acquisition is overvalued. But if we use the updated revenue figures, the transaction remains financially sound." One of the investors looked impressed. "How long did it take you to identify this?" "About 2 hours." Victoria stared at him. "You found this before the meeting?" Michael nodded. "I wasn't comfortable signing until I verified everything." The lead investor turned toward Victoria. "Your operations manager just saved both companies from a potentially disastrous mistake." Victoria didn't respond. Michael continued walking everyone through the revised agreement. He answered questions from lawyers, investors, and financial advisors without hesitation. Every answer was precise. Every number was supported by documentation. Within an hour, the room had completely changed. The tension disappeared. The investors agreed to Michael's revised terms, and the legal teams began preparing the final documents. Finally, the lead investor stood and extended his hand. "Mr. Carter, I've worked on hundreds of acquisitions. Your preparation is exceptional." Michael shook his hand. "Thank you." The investor looked at Victoria. "You're fortunate to have him." Victoria glanced at Michael for the first time that morning. She looked embarrassed. The documents were signed shortly afterward. The $500 million acquisition was officially completed. Everyone applauded. Michael quietly closed his laptop. He wasn't celebrating, he was thinking about Emma. He had promised her that he would be home for dinner. As he left the conference room, Victoria followed him. Michael. He stopped. She looked uncomfortable. I owe you an apology. Michael waited. What I said earlier was disrespectful. Yes, it was. Victoria nodded. I shouldn't have called you hired help. Michael looked at her calmly. I don't need special treatment. I know, I just want to be respected for the work I do. Victoria took a breath. You've earned more than respect. The following week, Victoria offered Michael a promotion to Chief Operating Officer. The position came with a substantial salary increase, decision-making authority, and a seat at the executive table. Michael accepted, but only after making one request. I want other employees to have opportunities too. Victoria agreed months later. Michael helped restructure the company's operations. Employees received clearer career paths. Managers were encouraged to recognize talent, and the company became more efficient. One afternoon, Victoria visited Michael's office. You know, she said, when I called you hired help, I thought I was reminding everyone of your position. Michael smiled. You were actually reminding everyone how little you understood it. Victoria laughed. You're right. Michael looked at a photo of Emma on his desk. I've learned that you don't have to be the loudest person in the room to be the most valuable. Victoria nodded. And sometimes the person everyone overlooks is the one holding everything together. Michael returned to work. The single dad who had been mocked in front of billionaires had walked into the meeting as an employee. He walked out as the man who saved a $500 million deal and earned a seat at the table